Liam Coen and the coaches give a peek behind the offensive curtain. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at @Yarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media, covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers as deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. For that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Lots to discuss thanks to the assistant coaches speaking with the media, but I want to start things off with offensive coordinator Liam Coen and a few things that he mentioned that I found interesting, and we are going to start things off with the offensive line. That has been an ongoing theme, especially going into the draft, then coming out of the draft with Graham Barton there in the first round. But Coen was asked about how the left guard position still seems open for competition and how he saw that playing out. He also went on to talk about the overall goal and what that was for the offensive line in order for there to be improvement over last season. Coen said, quote, "I think when you give a couple of those guys, you give Graham and Hainsey a chance to compete at the center position. You have a bunch of guys left that can compete at guard. We have, I think, done a great job this offseason with some of the additions we've gotten both in free agency and in the draft. Opeta has done a phenomenal job. All those guys have competed. They're pros. Opeta comes from a very well-trained offensive line coach, and you can see it. You can see that these guys are eager to compete, and they also fit in really well in the room," end quote. Now, I'm going to pivot from Coen for just a moment because I want to put a few things together. Offensive line coach Kevin Carberry also mentioned a competition between Opeta and Ben Bredeson, but the two coaches seem to have Opeta at the forefront of their minds. Coen went on to talk about the Bucs' lack of size in the interior of the line the last few years, saying, quote, "It affected us in 2019 in LA a little bit. Jared's a 6'4" guy and he has length, but we were a little bit thinner inside and you could feel some of that interior rush start to occur. That's really when quarterbacks are most uncomfortable, especially when you got a quarterback who's borderline 6 foot, and he's going to be ticked at me for saying that. But you just have to make sure that you're firm in the middle. That's not just in pass pro, it's in the run game. We have to be able to take care of the first down lineman. We've got to take care of the first level of the defense before we can get to the second level. I think we did address that. That was definitely something that was needed in our opinion, and I think we did a nice job of addressing it, and the guys have done a great job of putting on weight as well. Guys like Cody and Hainsey, they're trying to put a little more weight on and get bigger on the inside. They've done a great job so far, end quote. I will say this. As far as left guard is concerned, the Bucs will be getting smaller than they were last year, no matter what. Opeta is 6'4", 305. Bredeson is 6'5", 310. Well, Matt Filer was 6'6", 330. Stinney was 6'3", but also 310. So size isn't improving on the left, at the left guard position very much. However, Barton has the size over Hainsey. Malk is beefing up. But what it really boils down to is execution. And from what I could gather, watching Coen and Carberry talk about the offensive line, I think your starting offensive line for week 1 this season is going to be Tristan Wirfs, Sua Opeta, Graham Barton, Cody Mauch, and Luke Gedeke. The way these coaches, especially Coen, talked about Opeta just makes me believe that he's the odds-on favorite to win the job based on what they've seen so far. The glowing review of the system and the coach that he had in Philly, the fact that he was discussed by name much more often than Bredesen was, just gives me that gut feeling that he's already the leader in this guard competition. My concern is that Opeta has only started 10 games in 4 years. Bredesen has much more starting experience, but Coen and Carberry are going to pick the right guy, and it seems like they're already favoring Opeta. And of course, maybe this goes beyond the starting experience for these offensive linemen, and that there are traits and there are strengths to what they've seen out of the film and on the field now out of Opeta that just fits better with what Coen wants to do offensively. More importantly, what he's going to be asking his offensive linemen to do. There could be some quickness or some agility there that Bredesen just doesn't have the same level of, and Coen knows that he's going to need. So I'm not sure at this moment. We're a long way from having this written in stone. This is going to be one of the really interesting training camp battles to watch. There's only so much you can gather from these 2-3 day camps. There's no contact. There's really not a lot that you can take away from other than how these coaches and how these coordinators are utilizing these players, who they have kind of running with the ones versus with the twos, how they're switching them in and out. But Coen said that they're still a long way away from fully installing this offense in just the way that they approached both Coen and Carberry, the way they approached how they spoke about Opeta. Just it really makes me think that there are some traits there that he just didn't get the opportunity to really show in Philadelphia. We don't know what Cohen's going to be asking out of his guards. We don't know exactly what kind of schemes he's going to want to be running. And Bredesen is going to make a great depth piece. That's another guy that can play multiple positions across the line. And maybe they're looking at him as, you're more versatile than Opeta is. If a guy goes down, we're going to need you to fill in at a bunch of different spots. Obviously, Bredesen wants to be the starter. He's going to fight for that job, and it's going to be an absolute battle. But the impression that we're getting, it's early May, but I think those are going to be your 5 starting offensive linemen. But speaking of training camp battles, what about the Buccaneers' 2 newest offensive playmakers? That's going to be coming up next on this episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, parlays, and much more. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. The Boston Celtics are the favorites to win the NBA Finals at plus 105, followed by the defending champion Denver Nuggets at plus 500, and the team they're facing off against now and trailing, the Minnesota Timberwolves, third in line at plus 600. In the race for Lord Stanley's Cup, the greatest trophy in all of sports, the Carolina Hurricanes are the favorite at plus 400, followed by Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers at 430, then the Florida Panthers at plus 490. And if the Boston Celtics had let Sam Hauser shoot more three-pointers, I might have been $1,000 richer today, because that was the only leg on my parlay that I missed. So don't make the same mistake that I did. Make sure that your parlay is a winner. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Every day, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. I think it's going to be time for a little Chris Braswell breakdown like I did with Graham Barton on Monday's episode. In the meantime, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Don't think that we were going to get out of this without discussing the Bucs' two newest playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. And Liam Coen and some of the other coaches spoke with the media about running back Bucky Irving and wide receiver Jalen McMillan. So let's start with Bucky and what the Buccaneers saw in him. Liam Coen spoke about his close relationship with Oregon offensive coordinator Will Stein and his interest in Bucky Irving, saying, quote, Bucky's pretty dynamic where he gives us the ability in the run and the pass game, right? The screen game, and also from a special teams standpoint in the return game as well. I'm actually pretty close with the OC out in Oregon, Will, and he told me Bucky's his favorite player that he's ever coached. Somebody that's team first, will do anything and everything he's asked to do. From Chicago, tough kid, loved him when he came up on his visit. Just the kind of kid that I think will fit really well in this building. And the nice thing that I like about Bucky is he gets to his top speeds early. When he accepts the handoff, he bursts and accelerates through the hole and can make people miss in space, end quote. Running backs coach Skip Peete, of course, also talked about the addition of Bucky Irving and had more glowing comments and a pretty impressive comparison. Skip Peete said, quote, I think he's a young back that's versatile. He can play all three downs, sudden, good change of direction, and obviously can catch the ball out of the backfield, create big plays. That's the thing that probably excited me the most. His ability to bounce off people was something that you notice quite a bit for a guy that's not real big. But I think he's a guy that has a unique feel and doesn't really take a direct hit. He'll take glancing blows, but not too many direct hits. Most guys have success in space, but I think the difference is guys have to be able to create the space, and he has the ability to do that. He's sneaky fast. He's a guy that can change directions, can cut on a dime. Seems like he has fairly good hands, but he's somewhat of a natural runner. It should be a lot of fun working with him. Should be fun training camp to watch these guys compete and showcase what they're capable of, end quote. Then when Pete was asked if he saw Bucky being like Tony Pollard, who he coached in Dallas, Pete said, quote, I think he can. Bucky was brought to Tampa to help this football team. And I know you go back to my draft reaction episodes, and I talk about liking this pick, not loving this pick, because of the style of running back and the size of running back that I was hoping the Buccaneers were going to bring in. But there's going to be a competition for the RB2 spot behind Rachaad White, with Bucky going up against Chase Edmonds and Sean Tucker being back in the mix. Rodney Peete also spoke about Tucker, how he was kind of at a disadvantage. He missed the mini camp. He missed the rookie camp. He missed the OTAs, missed part of training camp because of that injury. But they like the explosiveness that Bucky Irving brings, the decisiveness, the vision, the one cut, one step, full speed aspect of his game. Now, I am going to talk more about Bucky on Friday's episode. I have a special guest lined up. I'm not going to give away any details yet until it's officially official. But I thought those comments were certainly interesting, and it shows where they view Bucky as of right now, how they viewed him in the draft, and why they took him over some of the other running backs that were available at the time. Then finally, Jalen McMillan, who I've already gone on record as saying I think he's the week one wide receiver 3. Coen got a big smile on his face when he was asked about McMillan and said, quote, I love J-Mac. He's a true route runner. He's a guy that's wired to separate, has the ability to work the defense at all three levels. He can run the option routes, the choice routes, but also has enough speed to get down the field vertically. very quarterback friendly with the way he gets out of his breaks. He's a hands catcher, and he played in a system with a group of guys that was extremely competitive. He has that competitive nature to come in here and compete for early playing time, end quote. Well, wide receivers coach Brian McClendon was also asked about McMillan's role, and he said, quote, really, really excited about Jalen. Obviously, with my college background, I remember when he was coming out as a high school player. He was a really highly recruited kid. He went on to college, and to be quite honest with you, if he didn't get nicked up the way he did, he probably wouldn't have fallen to us in the third round. We feel really fortunate to be able to get him here. The thing you really like about Jalen is his position flexibility. He's a guy that can play all three spots. And when I say all three spots, both the X and the Z, and obviously the slotted F also. So it gives you a really good comfort that wherever we need to put this kid to get him on the field the fastest, you can do that. A lot of it's going to be up to him. He's going to have to come in and work hard and learn, but you feel like you're getting a human being that's going to strive to do those things every day. When you see him be able to beat man to man and make those contested catches and catches over the middle and get yards after the catch and everything else, you get excited. Like I said, we feel real fortunate that he fell to the third round, end quote. Another prospect that the Buccaneers have high hopes and expectations for right out of the gate. They had a plan for him the moment they called the pick in, and you can tell how excited Coen and McClendon are that he's joining Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and the rest of the receivers there, but he is not the wide receiver 3 immediately like I have been saying I think he is. He's going to be competing with Trey Palmer for that other outside receiver, that Z receiver spot, and he's going to have to earn his snaps. Now, ultimately, you guys know I think he wins that job and he gets the majority of the snaps at that spot, but it's not being handed to him. As much as McClendon talked about how lucky the Bucs were that he fell to them, and that if he doesn't get injured or he doesn't get nicked up, he's probably gone much sooner than their pick in the third round. He didn't. He's still a bottom of the third round pick at the end of the day, and he's not going to be handed anything by this coaching staff. So 3 of the biggest position battles that we are going to see in training camp, and those are always really fun to watch, but 3 of the biggest ones on this team are all on the offensive side of the ball. It's the starting left guard, it's the RB2 behind Rachaad White, and it's that wide receiver 3 that the Bucs desperately needed to upgrade over last year. So lots of great stuff from those coaches. Looking forward to more coming from them, and plenty of position battles that we're going to talk about on the defensive side of the ball down the line. But yes, you know I'm going to have to talk about the roast of Tom Brady, and that is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards, and then the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there is so much to get. Unique stickers, you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. There's cool new playing pieces that you can travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton of them include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machines. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win, or the ever popular rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Wrapping things up here on a Wednesday episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast, and we got to talk about the roast of Tom Brady. So those that watched it know, but those that didn't, the roast of Tom Brady aired on Netflix live Sunday night. It's still there if you want to go and watch. I highly recommend that you do. But there are a few things that I wanted to discuss about it, and I'll make this as brief as possible. First and foremost, I had to laugh at the lead up to the roast when Levante David was on the Rich Eisen show, and he was asked who in the Bucs locker room couldn't handle being roasted, and David said Devin White because he's too sensitive. No surprise there. Second, I have to say that I was a little disappointed in the lack of acknowledgement for Tom Brady's Buccaneers teammates that were in attendance. Up on stage behind the comedians were Levante David, Brashad Perryman, Ryan Jensen, and Donovan Smith. Now, of course, there were lots of former Patriots there. Julian Edelman, Randy Moss, Gronk were all roasters. You had Matt Light, Danny Amendola, Rodney Harrison, a couple of other former Patriots teammates sitting back behind the athlete roasters, whereas the Bucs were behind the comedian roasters. And it really was a Patriots love fest. And yes, I get it. He was there for 20 years. He will always be a Patriot. But he was still in Tampa at the end of his career. He still won a Super Bowl in Tampa, quarterbacking the first team to ever win a Super Bowl in their home stadium. And as far as I know, he still lives in Tampa. You would have thought that if he was going to invite Buccaneers teammates to attend and to sit on stage to share this night with, he would have at least acknowledged them in some way. Gronk, kind of the same thing. He got up there, he did his roast thing, started ad-libbing, but he only spoke to his Patriots teammates. No acknowledgement to the guys that he played with in Tampa. So it's ultimately not a big deal. I just found it a little disappointing, as did Ryan Jensen's dad on Twitter. But finally, I want to say this, and I'm going to catch some heat for it, but here it goes anyway. The roast was absolutely phenomenal, and I mean that for a few reasons. Number one, the jokes were unapologetically brutal, whether it was from his teammates or comedians or surprise guests, which for those that haven't watched, I'm not going to dive into who the surprise guests were in case that hasn't been spoiled for you, but everyone went for the kill shot, starting with Kevin Hart, who within the first 5 minutes was making jokes about Giselle and her karate instructor. Just absolutely nothing was off limits when it came to Tom, and he legitimately took it in stride and took it really well. But it was also kind of refreshing, and here's what I mean, and where I might catch a little bit of flack. In a world now where social media blows things just way out of proportion, and people can be and are offended by a lot of different things. And it seems like 9 times out of 10, when you speak in public or you speak in a forum such as this, where it reaches a lot of different people, you kind of feel like you have to walk on eggshells just on the off chance that you say something that could offend someone. This roast was refreshing in the fact that it absolutely didn't do that. Didn't even come close to doing that. No one cared who was offended. No one cared who took it too far. It was truly a roast. And if a joke offended you, all you had to do was wait 30 seconds and then someone else was going to be the focus of a vicious attack and you forgot all about it. There were no people, no events, no groups. Nothing was off the table. And I think that's something that honestly we're kind of lacking. And something that I tell my sons, especially with them being high school, middle school age, those teenage years, those are tough. And I tell them that you're not always going to agree with what people say. And people are not always going to agree with what you say. And there are going to be times that someone says something to you with the sole intent to try and get a rise out of you or intentionally hurt you or intentionally offend you. And the best thing you can do is laugh. Don't give them the satisfaction of getting under your skin, because then they're just going to continue to do it because they know they can. I saw someone on Twitter say it best after the roast, and I apologize for not giving them the credit they deserve. I tried to find the tweet so that I could credit the person that said it, but they tweeted out that the roast canceled canceling. And I thought that was absolutely great. Again, no one was safe, and everyone had shots taken at them. Like Kevin Hart said at the very beginning of that roast, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And honestly, that's probably the best thing that any of us can really do. With that, I'm going to bid you all a fair adieu. Coming up on tomorrow's episode, we're going to dive in to some Chris Braswell film and break down who the Bucs got with their second round pick. In the meantime, please make sure you're checking out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Check out everything on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs. Follow subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and become a Locked On Bucs insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.